Computer, initialize holosuite.
Holosuite Media.
This is the Fluffernutter. The Expeditionary Force. Damn, you monkeys are dense as a neutron star. Embrace the suck, sir. I'm sorry, they are going to be so disappointed.
Hello and welcome to the Fluffernutter, an Expeditionary Force podcast. My name is Nathan and I'm one of your monkeys for this evening, and I'm always joined by Steve, who's also known as MidNite Shadow.
Hello.
We also have our extra special guest monkey, who's also Steve.
Hello. I am happy to be Steve too. Monkey too.
So now we have all our monkeys here, so I think we're ready to begin. So I thought we'd start off today about talking about how we found the ExForce books. So MidNite, if you want to lead us how you found the books.
I found the books through you. Nathan had asked me about doing a podcast and told me about the books. So I sort of looked into it and thought they sounded interesting. So I started listening to them, and yeah, it didn't take me long to get into the book and to actually complete the first book, then listen to each one. And within 4 weeks, I'd completed all the 11 main books, and have also since listened to book one another 2 times ready for this podcast. Not that I enjoy it too much at all.
Crazy monkey. So Steve, or Monkey 2, how did you find the ExForce books?
I was fortunate enough. Somebody found it for me. My wife and child found it and brought it to my attention. We listened to audiobooks together as a family from time to time, and they had completely chosen this one, and I was like, okay, all right, I'll give it a shot. And wow. I mean, they really picked a winner. We were really excited about it. And I've definitely carried on with the rest of the books, but I think I've listened to Columbus Day, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 times.
Absolutely. The same as me. I found the books a completely different way. I was listening to The Martian, which was also narrated by R.C. Bray. And I thought, wow, I really like his style of narration. I think it's really great. I wonder if he's narrated anything else. And I had a couple of Audible credits left, and I thought, I'll just have a little look. So I found it completely by accident, and I got hooked ever since. So it's my go-to for everything. So and I've listened to Columbus Day a few times. When I say that, it's about 4. And loving the book so far. So that's how we all found them. Okay, so Columbus Day then. MidNite and I were talking earlier, and we really didn't know what Columbus Day holiday was all about. So we thought, we'd ask our monkey number 2, Steve. Tell us, what is Columbus Day? Because we don't really know.
Okay, well, being from the United States, we've had Columbus Day, which is typically October 12th, celebrated based on Christopher Columbus traveling over the Atlantic Ocean and finding this continent. So for some reason, we think that's cause enough for a holiday. Or at least has been, and now it's actually quite controversial to celebrate Columbus, but it's still on the calendar, so we still mark it. It really has a lot of imagery or metaphor to, well, it's probably not metaphor. I think it's just imagery to how civilizations that are less technologically advanced react when a more technologically advanced civilization shows up. So the Native Americans here in the United States seeing a big Spanish or Portuguese ship for the first time must have been incredible for them to encounter, and that's probably exactly what happened to all of us monkeys here on Earth when we first see the Ruhar show up. And that's a good place to start. because it's very much a part of United States culture to understand that difference, that contrast in technological species, I guess.
Oh, that makes a whole complete new understanding for the title now. So I thought Columbus Day was all about leaf peeping.
There is a fair amount of leaf peeping during that during that holiday, but it's definitely something that has been latched on by the United States, and Native Americans like to make us aware that, hey, it maybe not have been such a great day for us, which it probably wasn't such a great day for humanity when Pristang and the Ruhar showed up. So very fitting.
One thing I noticed with chapter 1 was Craig actually deals with that in that first part, where he said, like in the Native Americans in, what was it, 1492, that over the horizon come ships, technology, advanced, aggressive culture, and that's it. Their lives have changed forever and for the worse. And it's quite fitting, the name of the first book, because it sets up what has happened here on Earth, and it's basically duplicating that, but in a space setting.
Right. And unfortunately for the Native Americans, they never found an elder AI to kind of look after them.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've spoken briefly about the Ruhar invasion. So shall we dive straight into that? I mean, could you imagine what it would be like seeing that Ruhar spaceship fly over your town? I mean, I live in quite a quiet town, and I know if I saw anything falling out the sky into the middle of the town square, I wouldn't be going towards it. I know I would be going the other way. So.
Well, if you would have asked me last year, I would have had a completely different answer. I would have said I would be completely surprised and freaked out and probably head for the hills. But in 2020, I pretty much expect it at this point.
Yeah, it's like, what else can go wrong?
Exactly.
Thing is, for me, I probably wouldn't have even noticed that it had happened, because I would probably still be in my dark study with blackout blinds even during the day, just like no lights, just doing stuff on computer. Apart from reports on the internet, it's just like, oh, probably a hoax, and I'll just carry on, TV on in the background or audiobook on the background while doing something on computer, and sort of not even notice it for the next couple of days.
That's it, until the power goes out.
Yeah, until the power goes out, and it's just like, look, my battery can only last for so long. Where's the internet gone?
So are we talking a day, 2 days, 6 days? How many days would that be?
Well, if the internet had gone out, and I would notice instantly.
Okay.
So it depends, because what I'd probably do is, as soon as it goes down, I'd check my connection. So, right, no line to the modem. So I'd then use my mobile phone to get a signal. So it depends how fast the mobile networks all went down. But yeah, once that had gone down, it's like, okay, what's going on? Then I'd go out. Well, maybe.
You'd be too busy on the phone to your internet service provider complaining about the shoddy service.
Yeah. Well, knowing me, I'd probably start to write an email first and going, oh shit, can't send it.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So the aliens have arrived, and we meet our hero, Joe. So he's going full-heartedly into the middle of the invasion zone and comes across the ice cream truck.
Oh, yes.
Barney. Would you have gone with the ice cream truck, or would you have found something else?
I would have used whatever was there, to be honest. In that sort of circumstance, it's just like, you can't be picky.
You definitely have to go with what with what you have. I think he's lucky that in Maine in October there's an ice cream truck at all. So
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
usually the ice cream trucks are all packed up, but I guess one that's spray painted in a terrible imitation of a Barney caricature would probably be out there. It might be, somebody's primary source of transportation. Who knows?
Well, he does actually say that it was sort of stripped down because there wasn't any of the seat belts or anything else in there. So it's probably was because of the time of year that it wasn't on the road. So they're actually working on getting it up and running for sort of spring, summertime.
Giving it its a yearly overhaul, probably.
Yes.
That's it, yeah.
Giving Barney a little bit of a touch up.
You don't fight the Ruhar with the vehicle that you want. You go to fight the Ruhar with the vehicle that you have, which is, I guess, Donald Rumsfeld's quote for, going into the Middle East.
Yes,
But,
absolutely.
yeah.
Do you think if Joe had the hindsight to know that Barney would follow him forever, would he have still done it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, he's of the character. Even if he knew that was what's going to happen, he would have. He always seems to do the right thing, and that would have been the right thing. But he would have hated it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he would have just hated it, but he would have still carried on. Just makes you wonder if he had a chance to do it all again, would he? And I think definitely he probably would.
One thing I did find interesting was when it came to him serving, is it was always listed, even when it came to his fire team and his second fire team, they had all served in Nigeria, whereas I'd never heard of anything going on in Nigeria. So I would have expected Iraq or Afghanistan, and you did get them mentioned later on
Yes.
by some service members.
Smythe, yeah.
But the main places that they were serving was Nigeria, which I thought was very different because, of course, I hadn't really heard of anything about that. So, Steve, was that something that was big in the news over in the States?
No, actually, and I've thought of that quite a bit over the course of listening to the book. And I could be completely wrong, and this is just me guessing, but I think that Craig just he didn't want to trivialize what some members of the army or armed forces had gone through in the Middle East. Probably wanted to take the politics out of it and choose a different place that could have been a hotspot. That being said, we're typically involved all over the globe, and we don't necessarily know about it until afterwards. So it could be something that was real, but I doubt it. I think, honestly, he was just trying to make sure he was being respectful to the armed forces and not trivialize what they had gone through by choosing a separate place that maybe hadn't had that kind of attention.
Yeah, that's the feeling I got, that it was a conflict that was going to happen in our near future, if you like, rather than something that's actually happened in this time.
The only thing that I could think of as a reason for choosing it was to do with the actions of the militias over there, with how they treated women and young girls, and with regards to what happens when they break out of jail and the treatment of the females in the storyline. So I did wonder if maybe there was more of that sort of behaviour by those militias and what Joe experienced with, was it that school?
Yeah.
So I do wonder if things like that is what made him maybe focus on another part of the world where that happened.
That's a good point. It may have been something where the author's trying to, draw attention to some of the, hey, there's stuff going on over here that isn't great, but also it serves the purpose of paralleling how humans and Christang go about interacting with each other. That's a good point.
Absolutely. And I think the Christangs represent the worst in us all, don't they? Where the Ruhar are not so bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so he's captured the alien and now we're off into space. And I think, the biggest thing for me was going up the, what do they call it? The beanstalk.
Oh, right. Yeah. The big space elevator. That's a dream.
Yes.
That we've all been waiting for. But that was fun. I really liked that part. I really thought it was, fairly well thought out, how, just logistics of how these characters are going to get around in the universe, what types of vehicles. I really like different kinds of vehicles that are talked about through all of the books, but as we're getting introduced to them in Columbus Day, that was definitely a very fun piece of technology that they described.
Yeah.
It's one thing that I have actually noticed a lot of when it comes to the books Craig's written, is a lot more thought seems to have been given to the universe than you get with a lot of books, because I think Craig, from my perspective, he's gone into this with most or all of the storyline sort of mapped up in some sort of way, whereas I think a lot of writers, when they do a book, they're just focusing on one book and then they expand on that. And to me, it just feels like he's had this big overall plan, and then he's really gone down and sort of planned it all out. So he knows how all these things integrate from book one to however many books he's got planned for this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was listening to him and R.C. Bray on their podcast, or something they did for YouTube at the launch of the last book, and he'd said he'd already written the last couple of pages of the last book, even though he hasn't written the books in between. So he's definitely got a plan, and he knows exactly where things are going to end up.
Interesting. You'll have to send me the link to that.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we can include that in the show notes as well. So if anybody else who hasn't seen it, they'll probably find that interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to click on it.
I'll send it over. Okay, so the thing for me, the big space elevator thing, just seems like a massive dream, and I think we all would love one of those. And we've got things like Blackpool Tower in this country where you can go up to the top and have a look round, and having that looking round orbit, that would be absolutely amazing. So for me, that was a big wow. And it did remind me of another book, Old Man's War, which they had a space elevator, the same sort of principle. But I guess that's theory, isn't it? It could be practical if you had the millions and millions of dollars and pounds to build it.
I don't. I'm fresh out of space elevator building funds.
Yeah.
Well, it's also going to would be a matter of resources as well. Building something like that, you would need some sort of material that was strong enough and light enough that it wouldn't just sort of fall down.
Mm.
So, of course, it's interesting the way that Craig describes some of these things as being sort of like as thin as a bit of string or hair or whatever it was. And the fact that he's given thought of what would happen if it all broke and would wrap around the planet and stuff.
Mm.
That's a really good point. I like that you get enough detail that your brain can believe that it's plausible, but you don't get enough detail that you're disappointed that you know it wouldn't work. You know, that he has a kind of this great way of explaining away the pieces that you don't need. Don't worry about that. You don't need to really understand how the power source works. You're just monkeys. You're not going to understand it. There's a lot of that in some key places, but I think he does a really good job of balancing that out so that it's still very accessible for a reader to believe that this is something that's going on.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Joe isn't super bright, so you get to see the world through Joe's eyes. So it's like, well, okay, I guess we're going to another planet.
Yeah, well, you also get that throughout the book where it's explained. So even if it's not scientifically correct, the way Joe talks about it's just like, well, that's how I think of it anyway. So it's like Craig's get out of jail card when it's like something's. So the scientists, they're going, well, that's just complete bullshit. That's not how it works. But because it's from sort of Joe's point of view, and because he has even admitted himself, he's not the sort of the brightest person out there. He hadn't even decided what he wanted to do in life, sort of thing. So it gives that sort of way of sort of saying, right, this is how I think it works. And then, of course, from the Skippy side, it's just like, how do I explain it to you dumb monkeys? And so it's sort of dumbed down in a way that they can try and figure it out, but may not be completely correct, or the fact that he can't actually say something. So it's a very good and in most cases a very fun way of him explaining things that may not actually be correct at all, but it then doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the way that Joe gets all his information from Wikipedia, because I know that's exactly where I'd get mine from as well.
Well, the funny thing is, of course, is when we were talking about launching this show, we were talking about the book, and it's just like, actually, when is Columbus Day? It's just like, don't know. And of course, we both at the same time brought up Wikipedia and was like, October 12th. Because it's just the thing you do.
Absolutely. That's where my knowledge comes from, is Wikipedia. So if it's wrong, it's wrong. What am I going to do?
Considering that most of the site, it's all driven by the community, and you've got people from the community who check it, it's kept up to date with accurate information. I know there are times when people edited it and things are there for a short time. But of course, then when that all goes wrong, it sort of goes around the planet so quick with screen grabs and everything else. And sort of it's almost like, oh, you can't trust Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But it's surprising how accurate and up to date it is actually kept.
Well, I'm still waiting for someone to write my Wikipedia page. So we'll find out.
Well, I am an author on it.
Oh,
Well,
there we go.
there you go. Happy birthday.
Many years ago, I was doing some work for a charity, so I created Wikipedia page for the charity so people knew what they did. I haven't done anything on the site for many years apart from using it as a reference, but yeah, I've still got a user on there.
Excellent. Okay, so let's move on to Kristang spaceships. So we're moving off the planet. We're on our Kristang spaceship. We're floating around, and Joe goes, "Where do I charge my iPad?" I mean, that is such a me thing. Oh, where can I charge my phone? So, would you have thought about taking your iPads and electricals with you into space?
Oh, absolutely. Backup hard drives, everything I possibly could. I'm like, I may never be back. I need to bring as much as I possibly can.
I would have had external hard drives, laptop, tablets, phones. I would have had my spare battery chargers and connectors. I would have had the entire thing. But that's just me. How I once went to go to the EFA convention in Berlin for work. And of course, I had my laptop. And anybody who knows me knows I have got a huge laptop rucksack, and of course went to through the airport with it, and of course I'd left all the spare wires and cables in it, so of course called to go in through, and I get pulled aside and asked to empty the bag, and it's just like cable after cable, little pouches here, they put it back through, there's still cables in it, finding where that is. So I'm sort of stuck at airport security trying to get my bag emptied so they can actually check there's nothing wrong in there. So yeah, I would have definitely have brought absolutely everything, and that would have been the first question I asked even before I got onto the elevator.
I do think that part right there, where they start to talk about the Kristang spaceships, and really that's where they really start to set up the rules of space travel, like how long it takes to get places. They really kind of set your expectations of, okay, it takes this long to get this far away if they take this and they do this kind of jump with this kind of spacecraft. And now we have long range carriers that you can latch onto, but those aren't Kristang. Those are, a different species. So that was really important to me. And when I listen to it and re-listen to it, I think about that again. I'm like, okay. So these are the hardcore rules that Craig is setting up for how people are going to get around. And I thought that was pretty fascinating, because that problem in every science fiction story that you really see, whether it's hyperspace or warp or, Battlestar Galactica jumping or anything, everybody has their own kind of take on it. And this was, I thought this was a very, a good way to bridge between some of those technologies, and interesting.
Yeah, also when he goes into all the species, as I was saying before, you can tell that there is a big overall plan, because it's quite complex, the structure of all the different species and who reports to who and the differences between them. And for a first book, for many sci-fi books, you don't get that sort of level of details until further books, which is why I was saying earlier, I always had the impression that these stories were mapped out on a big scale well before pen hit paper for book one.
And I think he takes his time really kind of establishing these rules and establishing the characters. And so this is where sometimes Craig gets faulted for, story construction or whatever. But I think he's done a pretty good job of managing everything that needs to happen before really the big payoff at the end of the first book, where really I feel like that's kind of where everything starts. Like everything else is just, we need this to establish all the different rules and all the different characters and where everybody's going to be. And then we can, put the character up in a tree and throw rocks at the character, which is, pretty standard. I think Craig did a really good job with that. But I had to tell, like I was talking to my my pals on the other podcast that I'm on. I'm like, you have to give it time. You have to get through it. It's really good. There's a big payoff, but you gotta give it a chance. And everybody that I've told that's come back to me and said they loved it really appreciated that, because they're like, after a little while, I had a hard time, like, where's this going? And then it gets there, and then it's awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, and you just see book one as the setup for the rest of the series, and without book one, you're not going to understand or have the rest of the series. So yeah, all the little setups, all the rules and everything is really important to me as well.
For me, I didn't have any sort of struggle trying to get to like the end or anything else. I really identified with Joe, and especially his sort of sense of humor, and I just wanted to keep listening purely because of that. And then of course by chapter 10, when you get to Skippy, the two of them, I was laughing so hard I had tears. And as I said, I was enjoying it before then, especially when they're at Camp Alpha and sort of you got, was it McDougal saying, "But you fuck one sheep." Just I hadn't expected that, and I just laughed so loud the whole time. Just those sort of interactions, it just really is. It's my sense of humor sort of thing, and just absolutely loved it. So there's no point of it where I was just going, "Oh, where is this going?" or "I wish they'd wrap this up." I was just enjoying that story and going along with him finding things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, it was when you were at that part of the book, the next day I woke up, a text message from you, and it just said, "You fuck one sheep." It's just like, oh, I know exactly where he is in the book.
Yeah, because the last several weeks I've been doing sort of 24-hour days working on stuff for the relaunch of Holosuite Media and all the new podcasts. So I'd been listening to the audiobooks while getting stuff sorted. So of course, yeah, the middle of the night, that thing happens, and I had to pause it. I was just laughing so hard, and I just had to say something to somebody. So it was just like went straight onto Facebook Messenger and just typed that in.
That's so funny. So we've been to Camp Alpha, we've met the Mavericks, but we don't know the Mavericks yet, and we've met Shauna. So I think Joe did quite all right there.
Yeah. Good for you, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the first and last time. Oh no, I think he did get some more, but not yet.
Yeah, it's, again, even with that sort of his sense of humor and the humor of a lot of the other characters, just like, "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm just putting my fingers through your hair." It's just like, I don't think that's what. And it's just, it just really does sort of just, it just really makes me laugh, the whole thing.
Yeah, he's definitely smooth.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, the one thing that I had picked up on is left-handed rifles. Now, I used to be in the Army Cadets when I was younger, and there was always a thing for recruits that knew nothing about handling weapons. Whenever you were doing something with them for the first time, it was a standing joke. You go, "Right, is anybody left-handed? Right, do you want to go down to the quartermaster and go and get a left-handed rifle?" Because although you can these days get adapters and things, but essentially there are no left-handed rifles. And the army, they only have right-handed rifles. When you go and train, you're trained how to shoot with it with your right finger on the trigger. But of course, he's got about having left-handed rifles, and even when it comes to them later on, when it comes to the mech suits, and you've actually got people with the left hand having the bits for the bots with their left hand. It's just like, well, given that they're military and that they would have always used their right hand as a trigger finger, I don't think they would have used their left. Out of all the book, that was about the only thing that I picked up on which would have been wrong.
Well, maybe the US Army don't discriminate against left-handed people, Steve.
Well, I was going to say, well, from a country where you can't, shake a tree without a rifle falling out of it, there are adapters for right-handed, left-handed, but it's the same way. It's you get one rifle, you learn how to do it one way. But I mean, how many times in other pieces do we get stuck with controls that we're not happy with? I know, like in video gaming, sometimes I'm too lazy to switch the controls exactly to how I like them to be. So I have to retrain my brain to do certain things on a video game controller because this game is slightly different than the other. I think that they could probably retrain their heads, but when it is fine motor skills on one side, it's not like you can do that with a guitar or anything like that either. I mean, there are left-handed guitars, there's right-handed guitars, there are left-handed people that play right-handed guitars, and there's right-handed people that play left-handed guitars. But you have to learn it that way, and you can't just pick up another guitar that's a different kind and go at it unless you've taken the time to learn both ways. So so I just spent I don't know a minute and a half not knowing what I'm talking about.
Don't we all?
That's me most of the time.
Right, okay. So we've been to Camp Alpha. We've managed to get ourselves a promotion. Well done, Joe, Sergeant. And he gets a fire team and sent off to Paradise. So let's talk about the smell then. Parmesan cheese. Is that a place we want to live?
I mean, I had Parmesan cheese last night, and it seemed okay. But after a while, I think it's like anything. You'd kind of become desensitized to it, and when you get back to Earth, you wonder where the Parmesan cheese smell is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and thinking about the smells there, where it's all described really well, it just really puts that whole planet. It's not exactly paradise. It's got a bit of a whiff to it. And he brings that back in several of the other books. That paradise smells a bit funky. So it's really quite interesting that's been built up and put in place. And that's part of the culture there.
For me, I have no sense of smell, so it wouldn't have actually bothered me because I've got severe allergy problems and severe sinus problems. So most of the time I can barely breathe through my nose, never mind smell. So yeah, for me, I wouldn't have even noticed.
Fair enough.
You'd have been all kinds of happy. I like the Paradise setting because we get to interact with two characters that really stand out for me that I really like, the Burgermeister and Lester Cornhole.
Yes.
I love the interaction between both of those characters and Joe, but I think I get more of a kick out of Lester. I think the Burgermeister is a really well done character, but I think Lester's hilarious.
Absolutely. He is just a shining moment, and I always want him to be one of the pirates because I really like him. I'd like to see more of Lester Cornhole, and I don't think we actually go back to him, do we?
Yeah, you don't hear about. There might have been one part where they go back to Paradise and they mention him one time. I can't remember, but it would be really awesome if Lester and Joe got to see each other one more time.
Yeah, I agree totally. I really like Lester and all the little corners.
I think I saw at one of the fan events here in the U.S. I think I saw somebody dressed up like Lester Cornhole.
Excellent.
and it was okay. First of all, it was super creepy, but also remarkably accurate. I'm like, yeah, that's Lester.
That's excellent. That really is. I mean, and tea with the Burgermeister, I think that is just amazing. The hamsters have cups of tea just like we do. I just thought that was that a really nice little tie-in. So if we're talking about Burgermeister, then we have to mention Major Perkins.
Oh yeah, and I did not see her becoming like a major character, but boy, they really developed her.
Yes, I was shocked that she actually came back. I was like, she's really okay. She's seems a bit like she's got a stick up her ass, but that's obviously Major's in the army. But looking at her now, I really like her and how she developed over the series.
Well, the thing is, she was the intelligence officer, wasn't she?
Yes.
She's all about facts and information gathering. So for her, everything's serious. It's not where sort of you've got all the people at the bottom of the ladder, all the grunts who are sort of in the field and everything else. So it's all about information. So she always was going to be a sort of serious character, especially to begin with.
And I like that it turns into, she has to do, she gets into some of the same kind of scrapes that Joe gets into, but she doesn't have an elder AI to pull her fat out of the fire every time.
Yeah.
She kind of has to do it herself and has to rely on herself. And she's had to make those hard choices, but you don't, again, in this book, you don't get to see that part of her. You just get to see the beginnings and how she interacts with Joe. And I think they've kept her fairly consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she also did well because there's the point where, because wasn't it her that actually informed Joe that he was being promoted to colonel?
Oh,
That's right, yeah.
She did so with a little bit of disgust in her face.
Yeah.
So it's just like you're being promoted like 3 levels or 2 levels above her, sort of thing. Because it's just like, oh, you're doing well to be promoted to that. It's just like, no, it's not for me.
Yeah.
it's just like,
I mean, and all he had to do was blow up 2 transport ships full of troops. I mean, easy.
Oh, and see that, I thought that was where a lot of really, I mean, Joe is not, he has some blood on his hands, right?
Mm.
And he doesn't necessarily know it, but I thought that was a nice touch to give him some, some weight, some moral weight of what he has done in this conflict, where he, shot down and actually, took a lot of lives of, Ruhar. And yet the Burgermeister is willing to, I mean, she full on works him over several visits to her. Like she, almost like you would develop a spy. You bring them on slowly, you give them little bits of information, you ask them questions that they have, because she knows that Joe has to come to these conclusions on his own. She can't just hit him with, you're in a lot more trouble than you think you are. This has happened. She needs to ask him the questions. And I thought that was a good piece of tension, because she is working somebody that it has been promoted because of a heinous thing that happened to her species. So, good piece of tension there, Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the fact that she offers him a job at the end before he busts out of jail as well is like, yeah, she obviously sees potential in what she can get from him as well.
Right.
Well, it's also very different because she sees actions of war in a different way, and it does get explained in the books. Her species have been fighting long before her great grandparents. So the loss of life due to war and the changing of factions and planets and all things, that's quite normal for her and her species, whereas it isn't for people on Earth.
A good point.
So you do have that. And I think also when it comes to Joe and his thoughts of taking down those 2 whales, also brings parallels to what happens here on Earth and what people suffer from mentally, who, like, when you've got drone pilots and aircraft pilots, because a lot of the combat that, especially for the UK and the US, a lot of the actual combats where there's especially a lot of life lost is due to drone and aircraft strikes rather than people on the ground, although there still is a lot of life lost through that. But yeah, a lot of that stuff is done where you don't see the enemy's face, and the fact that he's actually gone into detail of him imagining that the pilot looked back and saw him and stared at him and things like that. And it's just like, how many pilots and drone pilots are going through that in our own countries? They take these lives, but they're essentially almost playing a computer game.
Yeah, that's a good point. At least Joe had the feeling like, well, I'm kind of defending myself, and I'm defending, the humans that are out here, and those, poor drone pilots, they don't have that moral justification of, well, I'm defending myself, when you're sitting in a, trailer 20,000 miles away from your target, or however far. So there's that piece that he can kind of anchor himself to a little bit, that probably helps. But yeah, that weight has to be pretty big on him.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I mean, but for all his good things, he also ends up in jail twice. So
yeah, well, it also goes, because we go back to the Burgermeister and how she recognizes that although he took an awful lot of lives, he retaliated because the hamsters had basically taken hundreds of his people and they were essentially at war. And she also recognised the fact that he had, when it came to people who were not combatants, that he went out and suffered because he stuck up for people who were civilians, who weren't actually fighting.
Yeah, and I think that is like the essence of Joe, isn't it? I mean, that's he's got his morals, and he's not going to change his mind just because someone tells him. He believes what's right and what's wrong, and he knows the difference. And I think that that's really important, and that just shows you that's Joe Bishop.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so he ends up in the Kristang jail to start with, and during the Ruha re-invasion, breaks out. And this is where we meet Colonel Chang, Adams, and Desai, isn't it?
Yes.
So the first of the pirates, the originals.
And of course, you meet these women who are in a vulnerable state, and Craig has done a very good thing of showing how strong these women are. He hasn't done what a lot of books do, because it's a woman that's in the book that they're just weak and they're reliant on the men. Sort of, they're strong from the get-go. It's just like, I don't give a shit if I'm naked. I'm getting out of here. These boots are just useless. I'll go barefoot. They're very, we're getting out of here sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be very interested. We have actually got lined up as a guest at some point, a woman to be on the show. So I'd be very interested in actually talking about the women of the book series with her. So we will eventually branch off to do that. But the fact that we have so many strong female characters, I really do like about these books.
Yeah, I mean, I think Adams scares me. I think I don't think we can be friends. She just petrifies me, and she does all the way through. Well, even when you get to see her softer side, she's just like, oh, I don't think we would be best friends. Okay, right. So we've reached the point. We have to talk about Skippy.
That's it. We have to have a very serious conversation about Skippy.
I mean, basically, he's an Alexa, isn't he?
Yeah.
I work here in Microsoft land, and my wife actually works on AI for Microsoft, and she has been lobbying Microsoft for we have to get RC Bray to do the Skippy voice for whatever artificial intelligence we put out there. She's definitely talked it up. I don't know how successful she's going to be, but if it happens, it's her. Okay, she did it. I'm not taking credit for it, but she'll do it. Yeah, it'll be her.
That would be amazing.
You can just imagine it. You ask a stupid question, you dumb monkey.
I am hoping that's the case.
Oh, that would just be so good.
That would be amazing.
Thing is, if it did do that, they would have so many sales.
Absolutely.
Because as soon as it got onto the internet, people were like, really? And you just get so many people guessing it just for like the Skippy insults.
Right. Even if it's just an option, you just download the pack and have it go from there. Sure.
That's right.
Absolutely. But yeah, Skippy, what a great, he's not, I mean, he's definitely his own character. He's the sex machina or he's not a MacGuffin, but he's kind of, I don't know. I enjoy what he brings to the series because he brings that Skippy magic, which is a get out of jail free card, right? But also, that just opens up humanity to this whole other world of, a galaxy worth of knowledge that he's able to either pass down or he's not allowed to pass down, which makes you even more curious as to what's going on. But
yeah,
the way they interact, I love the way they interact. It's nice that Joe treats him like an equal, even though he's this, superior being in almost every way.
A lot of people on Earth, like the scientists, it's like, oh, sort of hold him in sort of reverence and everything else. But he's just like, you're a beer can, shut up.
Yeah.
That is kind of I feel like that's a very American thing. It's fairly impolite and who are you to talk to me kind of thing.
Well, the thing is, if it was somebody who maybe was a colonel, then maybe they would have thought this is a resource. But at the end of the day, he's a grunt, and the first thing he thinks is, I'm being pranked.
Right.
And he treats it as that. And the thing is, because Skippy basically comes back with the same banter, it goes on from there. So I think if someone who was further up the chain of command maybe would have thought this is a resource, and you wouldn't have had that. And Craig does actually cover that in the book. I think it was in book 2, about somebody actually says, what if somebody else had discovered Skippy?
Yeah, he wouldn't have been an arsehole, would he?
Maybe not, because, of course, who else was it that was in that group? You had, of course, you'd got Chan, you'd got a staff sergeant, because you got Adams, and
Sigh, I think.
Captain Desai.
Sai. So they were, 2 of them were officers, but, of course, if you'd actually got Adams, you probably would have ended up with the same thing.
She has that attitude.
Yeah.
That, yeah, you would have gotten something fairly similar, definitely.
But I think if it had been Desai or Chan, then it might have been different, because they probably would have recognised Skippy would have been a resource and then just asked a lot more questions rather than throwing insults.
So we're glad Joe found Skippy. Yeah.
And you know, that, I mean, like I said earlier in the podcast, that is where it really starts swinging. I feel it like it goes hard from that point all the way to the end of the book. Like, I feel like there's no real lull. You're not getting extra exposition, and that's what really made me want to get to the next book. That really pushed me forward. I always forget that there's they steal these ships, and they leave one of them here at Earth, and it just kind of hangs out in orbit, but it's, you know, kind of not accessible to any of the humans because, you know, Skippy puts the big bike lock on it and won't let him get to it. But
you're not playing with the toys.
Yeah, exactly. But I love that I love that, you know, Chang's with them, and, you know, from the beginning, and Desai's there from the beginning. Everybody there is, you know, kind of picked up along the way, and you get kind of a crash course in how to get home.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think one of the best parts of the book is when Joe introduces Skippy once they hit orbit. He changes his skin to, was it Bud Light, and says absolutely nothing.
that was hysterical. That was absolutely hysterical. And why did he choose Bud Light? Oh,
well, at that point, because of course it's just like how Joe asked this question. It's just like, how does he know so much about Earth culture?
Mm-hmm.
We already know that there have been satellites put into Earth orbit from the Ruha. So obviously he's been getting, because he's been stuck on the planet, he's been getting all that data from the satellites. And we do later on in the books find out a bit more about Skippy's connection to what goes on Earth as well.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of obviously he knows all this stuff, but again, why that particular one? So I do wonder if that's maybe one of Craig's favourite drinks.
That's a good point.
Well, we'll send him a case, maybe. I mean, so we're in space, and we're loving Skippy, and they've got this Kristang ship, the Flower, based upon Kristang poetry. I mean, who would have thought the Kristang wrote poetry? I don't know if anyone's seen Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or read the book, but Vogons like their poetry as well, don't they?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so I'm thinking big green lizardy type people. So maybe it's the green lizardy type like poetry. So maybe.
But the thing is, in some ways, you think of any culture on Earth, it's just like, you think gangsters, well, they've got rap. You've got all sorts of other groups who can be very violent but still have their own music. So it's not really surprising, but it's not the first thing you put together with a savage race or something. So just the fact that they name their warships after poetry, it's just something just so very different.
I love the ship names that the Kristang come up with, but I really love I really love the Giraffe names. I know we're not talking about those today, but
Yes.
I'm excited to hear you talk about those on a later podcast. But yeah, I like that they get the flower. And you know what? I miss the flower, right?
Mm.
Like that was a very useful ship for them, and how they use that to get to the Star Carrier that they end up taking and I'll let you get there before I do. I hate to be one step ahead.
No, go for it. You talk about the Dutchman.
Well, yeah, they get to the Dutchman, and it is such the way it's described. It's a Star Carrier where there's all these different places for other ships to be latched on to it, so that it can go long distances. And that means that the fuselage of this thing, or what you would think is the fuselage, is super long, is very, very long. So it's a weird looking spaceship from end to end. And that's the ride they decide to steal. And I think Joe is like, "Hey, what about that one over there?" And he's like, Skippy's like, "No, idiot, we're taking that one." And he's like, "I don't want to take that one." He said, "We're taking that one." You've seen that in like a bunch of buddy cop movies where they're trying to get away and they take the wrong car or whatever. But I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's amazing how they end up with it. And have the little trick making all the Thrennen go to sleep as well. Perfect.
Yeah, that was great. And I like that they don't use that all the time. In fact, there's always a reason why they can't use it, right? Skippy always says, "Well, we can't do it because of this." And he's like, "Hey, can't you do it?" "Nope, can't do it."
Yeah.
But that first time it could. And I liked that.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, and I think it's fantastic the way they didn't use Skippy always as you watch Doctor Who, right? And Doctor Who has the sonic screwdriver, and Skippy doesn't turn in to the sonic screwdriver all the time by using the same trick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually want to go back to the flower.
Mm-hmm.
One thing which I thought of, because of course it's the first ship that they lose as well, is about whether there's a sort of sexual reference to that, because ships are usually named after women, and when a woman loses their virginity, it's losing their flower. So whether or not the naming of it and that had any relation, I don't know.
Well, the full name of the ship is the Heavenly Morning Flower of Glorious Victory, so it might do.
I don't know why it popped into my head, but it was just this weird thought. It's just like, I wonder if that was actually named as a sort of internal joke of Craig's, just to see. I wonder if anybody actually sort of thinks of this.
Or is that just a British reference?
Oh no, that you hear that you hear that over here too. That's
okay.
Yeah, it's a thing.
So, but yeah, it was just something that I sort of picked up on. It seemed very relevant when, of course, being the first ship that they lose, the first ship that they gain, and they sort of move on to bigger, better things, sort of thing. I just suddenly thought,
Yeah, I don't know. We should. Does anybody have Craig's phone number? We should just give him a call.
Yeah, well,
Just
I'll
ask
ask
him.
I'll ask him.
Hey, did you think about virginity when you named the ship?
Is this an ode to an ex-girlfriend?
Oh, I hope not. Oh, I hope not.
Yeah.
If it was, I don't think he would admit that to his wife.
There we are.
So, but yeah, as I said, it was just a random thing, and I thought before I forget about it and we move on too far.
Oh, there we go.
But also the naming of the Flying Dutchman as well, sort of like all of them talking over each other about what it should be called. And of course, you'd got the Star Trek reference of it being called Enterprise, which is also a scene in Stargate. So if you've got Carter going, "You cannot call it the Enterprise," it's like, why not?
Yeah.
Because you get so much pop reference throughout the books. And you've got like the red shirt reference as well, because I think that was in book 1.
Yes, yeah.
And just the fact that they're having that same conversation, and I think there's Independence Day one about the communication. It's just like, oops, what do you mean, oops? We've got to work on our communication. There's so many references to other sci-fi films and characters and little mini quotes. So it's just like, how many of these can you pick up on? And I'm sure somebody somewhere has actually got a list of what references are in which places from Star Wars, Star Trek, Stargate, and other films.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
but, and every time I've listened to it, because as I said, in the last few weeks, I've now listened to book 1 3 times. It's just like, oh, actually, that's from this one. And
Yeah, and you know, you do pick up on it all the time, especially as you go through the other books, where you get a lot more. And won't give any spoilers, but the Skippy hologram is like amazing. So,
Oh, yeah.
I love the Skippy hologram, especially where he appears as a Jedi Knight.
yeah, that'll be good to when we get to, because the holograms book 2, is it? Was it 3?
I think it's 3. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2 or 3. So
Mm.
yeah, it'll be so fun to get into that at some point, and especially how that the hologram itself develops more characteristics of humans as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're about to save the Earth now. I don't think we've even spoken about the asteroid raid and discovering the combots after Jero's 2 weeks of planning.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's totally Skippy. I mean, and it's like when you're doing a web search for something, it's like, oh, well, why didn't that pop up earlier? And it's like, oh, because I didn't put that input in. So, and I think it brings it back that Skippy is he can't think like we think, so not organically. He's very much program.
It's very much like with Stargate, when you'd actually got this ancient alien race who get O'Neill to go and help them out because they need stupid ideas, because their level of thinking is just so much more far above that you don't think of it. And as a programmer, the amount of times I'm trying to figure something out and I'm thinking about doing this and doing that, and someone just says, can't you just do that? It's just like, oh shit. It's just like, oh yeah, duh. Because it's just, yeah, it's overthought. It's just like, oh, you can't do that because of this. And it's just like, yeah, but you can just do that. But how many times do you're trying to sort something out and you have overthought it so much? And it happens to all of us all the time. And that's the thing when you've got Skippy and Joe, is it really sort of highlights that. And it's just like the whole spacesuits.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just like Skippy comes up with this great big plan, and it's just like, yeah, how do we breathe in a vacuum?
Yeah.
Spacesuits. Perfect. So we save the Earth. We get back to Earth, and Thrannen are there, and we go full force into everything and blow them all up, and we've got a planet back. How do you think everyone's going to survive after that? I mean, it's such a huge thing. So the rumours about the Flying Dutchman and Sergeant Bishop or Colonel Bishop are going all around. If that happened in today's age, how would we all cope with that? I mean, I just don't know.
Well, I think it would be, I mean, I think we would be, feeling the pressure under the thumb of a superior race that's just going to keep us down. And then we kind of get released from that. It may have put a lot of things in perspective for a lot of humans, and unified us a little bit more, brought us together a little bit more.
Mm.
What struck me was when Joe gets back and he has to meet with the president. And I know that this was written before our 2016 election, because Craig didn't make reference to the name of the president, but it was a woman president.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, all right. Okay, there we are. And then now we are definitely not in that universe.
Yeah.
That's that definitely
absolutely
went the other way. And I bet Craig, and later in later books, when they come back and it's a new administration, and it's not as easy for Joe. I think he alluded to that too.
Yeah.
But they ask him, what would you like? What would you like for saving the Earth? And I blurted out laughing when I heard this the first time, cheeseburger.
Yeah.
I want a cheeseburger.
When in episode 0, when of course I'd only just listened to that section again, so of course all I had on my mind was cheeseburgers, and just I couldn't think of anything else.
Oh yeah. And I kind of want one now.
Yeah, always.
in this week's shopping, because I've now, as I said, I've listened to the book in the last week twice now, and all I've been thinking about is having cheeseburgers. So my wife has actually added burgers and cheese to the shopping list so we can have cheeseburgers, because all I can think of these days is having cheeseburgers.
Right. Right.
I mean, it was in one of the other books where Craig was describing this sandwich, and it was the one with maple mustard and everything. And it's like, I need that sandwich. So it's like, no, I need to make this sandwich, and I need to make it now. It's just incredible. It just really makes me hungry all the time.
Oh, yeah.
We're definitely going to have to do an episode on food. One of the people I've been speaking to about being a guest host, she's desperately wanting to create a food cookbook based on ExForce. Thing is, I know once we finish, I'm going to be starving hungry by the end of it, despite it more than likely going to be our evening, and I'd already have eaten dinner.
Yes.
I definitely do. I remember I need to post you to a can each of the brown bread in a can.
Oh, yes.
But I need to remember, was Joe pro raisin or against raisin?
Ooh, I think he was against raisin.
Yeah, okay. I actually enjoy the raisins, so I'm going to have to get a couple of the plain. And when I get the plain, then I'll ship those over to you, and you can tell everybody what you think.
Yeah, sounds good.
On the topic of food, I thought it was funny how so many people reacted on social media to our episode 0 and me having chicken in the Flutternutter.
Yeah, I mean, it's airlock material. It really is. But...
That is an abomination.
Yeah.
I don't know, because it's not like I've changed ingredients, because there is a part of the book where somebody changes some bits around rather than just adding stuff to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like chicken is anything special because it's sort of chicken, so it's bland. And
right.
So I don't know. I think Joe wouldn't be too upset with having chicken in a Flutternutter.
If it was bacon, I would agree with you. Chicken, it's airlock.
That's actually a good idea. I might actually get some bacon bits and put it in with the chicken.
Okay. We'll find out next time how that goes.
Yeah. Actually, could you take video of that? We'd like to see some video of that.
Oh.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll video me making bacon and chicken Flutternutter.
Fluffernutter, yeah.
See what the reaction is at social media.
Oh dear. You'll get banned.
Probably.
One of the admins, hey, quit posting this.
Yeah. Obscenities. Oh, absolutely. And I think apart from returning into space with a new crew and the mission to go and see what they know about humanity, I think we're pretty much wrapped up on the first book.
Oh, but you've got to talk about what was that scientist's name? The one that everybody hates.
Oh yeah, they really put him in his place. That had to have been a real person.
What,
That
was it
had to have been somebody in Craig's past that he needed to like his psychologist told him to work it out on that person in the book. But that was pretty great.
But yeah, especially when it came to him trying to get on and he's talking to Skippy and Joe, and even with them in the bar.
Exactly.
And especially when Skippy goes, "You can't even talk to me until you solve this equation." And he goes, "What did you send him?" He goes, "Just some sort of bullshit," basically.
Yeah,
which of course
exactly.
even made his guard detail smile, because of course she'd been so stone-faced before. But
Yeah.
But yeah, just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think you're probably right. It's probably that person we've all worked with, and we wish they got their comeuppance. So
Yeah, so there's always somebody who just sort of looks down on everybody else, regardless. Doesn't matter what they achieve. It's just like, sort of, you're still nothing.
So here's a question for, I know we're winding down, but would either of you go on that next mission? Would either of you hop on the Dutchman and head out with everybody?
Yes, absolutely.
maybe.
It's the unknown. It's like the scientists. They know going into it that there's a very big chance that they are not coming back. But if you've got something, it's just like, how many of us have thought about going into space? We've watched Star Trek, Stargate, Star Wars. And it's just like, yeah, what would happen if we were part of those crews? What would we do? And it's just like, if you really had the chance, would you really say no? Because, yes, admittedly, for us, we've got families. But apart from that, it's just like this sort of opportunity. It's just like, would you really have said no if you didn't have that sort of commitment? And even if you did, if you'd worked your whole life to figuring out the galaxy as a scientist, again, would you say no to it? Even if you never made it back, you would be able to gain that knowledge and figure out how many things that you just wouldn't have the opportunity to otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's also puts it back to Columbus. How many people went on his ship knowing that, oh, you're going to fall off the edge of the world, sort of thing, because people thought the world was flat and that they were never coming back, but still they went on there because it's just like, what is out there? Is it really just this big drop, or is there some other land, or all these things? And it's like with all these pioneers, and again, it all links back to Columbus Day.
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
I mean, for me, as long as I could get guaranteed that I wasn't eaten by a lizard, I don't think I would be able to do much. I'm a daycare nursery manager. So
You can look after Skippy.
yeah, well, look after Skippy and Joe, I guess. But I think that's all I could do. So I think I would be a big spare part.
Yeah, that's a good point. But eventually you're going to be needed. That's
it.
Well, I can tell you they definitely don't need a software salesperson. That's why I would be absolutely useless going on. Of course, I would want to go, but for the good of humanity, I would probably need to stay home. Just because I'd be the guy that just gets in the way. I'm standing on whatever part they need, or I'm absolutely the guy that would get in the way.
So you mean like Joe Bishop?
Well, I wouldn't have any ideas. That'd be my thing. I'd stand around a lot. I don't know. Hey, you're gonna have to fix this yourself. I have no idea what's going on. The galaxy does not need another middling drummer to show up and play out in the stars. But I would love to go and see everything, of course. But yeah, I think for the good of humanity, I'd have to stay home.
Yeah, I think the same for me. We'll just eject MidNite off onto the Dutchman.
One thing I think we should also talk about is the reason that Skippy likes Joe, because this is dealt with at the end when it comes to who's in charge. And he goes into why he basically becomes his best friend, because he was the first entity to actually treat Skippy as an individual. He didn't treat him like a computer program or anything else, which probably even the elders would have done. He actually treated him as he was a real person. And it's one question that I had thought of. It's just I know they developed this friendship, but why does Skippy like Joe so much? And of course it does get answered. It's this whole thing about respect and how you treat other people. Something as simple when it comes to like bullying, even as a kid, it's just like you call somebody else a name and it can really have an effect on somebody. And it's sort of turned around in this instance because Skippy, who has never been anything apart from an AI who has a job to do, is given respect, albeit through insults and everything else, but he is actually treated in a way that he's never been treated before.
It's very touching the way they do build up their friendship. And it just makes me ask the other question as well. Why is Joe so close to Skippy?
That's a good point. I would want to explore that.
Well, for me, I always saw it, and he does again go into this to begin with. He's keeping his word. He is a soldier. He needs a way to make sure his family, his friends, and the other people of Earth are safe. And Skippy is the way to do that. But he also respects Skippy due to the fact that, for the most part, where he can, he tells the truth. He's not bullshitting. He's upfront. I want to contact other AIs. And there's no trying to sort of mislead him and anything else like that. And Joe has said on multiple occasions, the amount of information they usually get given is often bugger all. But with Skippy, he tells them right off the bat, I want to be able to contact other AIs. I need you to help me do that. If you can promise me you will help me, I will help you. And this is the reason why Joe likes him, is because unlike other people that he's reported to or dealt with, he's actually got the information straight away. And for Joe, he respects that.
And they work hard to honor each other's agreements.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and as the books progress, they also forgive each other quite a lot of misdeeds. And I think that just builds them up stronger and stronger and stronger. So I'd love to see where it heads to next.
And I think where it heads to next would probably be on the next podcast, right?
Well, I think that's where we're heading.
Yeah.
There was another part of the book that I wanted to talk about. When they're on Paradise, it goes into information again about food, but about meat.
Oh, yes.
Even here on Earth, because we have all the problems with cattle, one of the big pollutants is the amount of cattle and the amount of land that's used for grazing in comparison for other things. And we do actually have scientists working on a way to create meats, which is basically generated in a lab rather than a living animal. And Craig has actually integrated that as part of something that the Ruha have. So it's not alive because they've got a machine that basically makes it move to build up the muscle density and everything else to actually make it usable.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought that was an interesting thing to include, because just for land purposes, pollution and things like that, we're already having to look into ways we can reduce the pollution and the greenhouse effect and all these other things. And finding alternative food sources like that is something we're actively looking at. And I think it's good the way that that is actually being brought into the books as a way for feeding people. So it gets more people open, whether or not this was deliberate or not, but it sort of makes people think about, oh, if this has, then yeah, there'd be no problem eating it, rather than people going, oh, it's grown in a lab, I'm not touching it. So I thought that was sort of an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, and I always thought, does it make you vegan?
That's a good point.
If you eat that, are you vegan? If you're not eating real flesh,
That's a good debate.
absolutely.
They talk about the hamsters as basically being vegans anyway because there's no meat, but the meat they obviously do have is grown in such a way. So, which of course then makes me think, why couldn't they do the same sort of thing but tweak the way the meat is produced so it's then edible for humans?
Interesting. They could probably do that.
I think it was a very interesting part of the book. I think my wife and I were talking about that just the other day out on a walk. We were discussing that Ruhar thing. So I'm glad you brought that up.
The two books I haven't yet read are the two Maverick books. So whether or not they get mentioned in those ones, but I'll have to find out when we read them, and we can discuss that when it comes to covering those books on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. When we get there. Okay, right. I think we're at a wrap. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining. So a big thanks to Steve, our special guest monkey.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
You're so welcome.
You mentioned that you have your own podcast. Did you want to tell people where they can find you?
No. Yeah, sure. If people are not already tired of hearing my voice, you can hear it along with my buddy Dave, whom I've known since what we call preschool over here. So about 4 years old, he and I have been pals, and we do this podcast every week called the Dave and Steve Show. So you can look it up that way.
Fantastic. I'll certainly give that a go. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Steve, MidNite Shadow. Do you want to say where you can find you?
Most people can find me over the internet at MidNite Shadow 7. That's night spelled NITE. And the podcasts, if you head over to holosuitemedia.com, where this podcast is housed, then you'll be able to find all the other podcasts that I help get on the net. And of course, if you would like to follow this show, you can get us the Fluffnut Pod at gmail.com or the Fluffnut Pod on any of the social media networks. The reason it's shortened that way is because Twitter's handles have to be 15 characters or less, and then it was, of course, easier to keep it all the same, even though it does sound a bit like a porn name. But I thought, screw it. Porn is mentioned enough times in the books, so the fact that the handle sounds a bit of a porn name.
Anastasia would approve, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so literally thank you to everybody, and we look forward to joining you all again. If you do want to be a guest on our show, just contact us via the social medias and we'll be in contact.
We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we are looking to release an episode once a month, and what we're going to do is we'll be releasing on the 12th of every month. So, until next month, bye.
Cheerio. Hello and welcome to the Fluffernutter podcast. See, I messed up already. Try again. Hello and welcome to the Fluffernutter podcast, an Expeditionary Force.
Fluffernutter.
Yeah, there we go. One more time and then I'm out the airlock.
Steve, it sounded like you're about to say something.
No, actually, I didn't have something. I had something weird happen where I had like some kind of a woodpecker land underneath my window and start tapping like crazy. I'm like, what is going on? So sorry to it's daytime here in the Seattle area. So we have active bird life out here.
No worries.
No, all I've got is bats.
Now I've just got to get it edited and assembled.
Yeah,
And out.
That's it.
Well, I am terribly sorry about that bird incident.
that's funny.
No, it's just I heard
because I was listening to what you were.
I just heard a noise and I thought you were about to say something. So of course, because we talked, I wanted to make sure that you got to say what you wanted to. So yeah, I didn't expect it to be something like that.
You were. I mean, I appreciate you, wanting to make sure I was, all set. But man, I've never had that happen before. This bird landed underneath my window. So I'm in my office looking outside at this tree that we just mangled, and I think this bird wanted its revenge. It came to my window and started pecking at it like a woodpecker. And I'm like, what is going on? And I didn't know it was a bird. And I had to get up and I literally had to tap on the window to get it to go. And the first few times I tapped on it, just looked at me and then tapped again itself. And I'm like, no, you got to leave. I'm trying to do a podcast here. Be polite. And it did. It ended up leaving. But yeah, what a dumb thing to interrupt a podcast. Sorry about that.
That is hilarious. I mean, I was having an interview this morning for a new job, and there was two squirrels running up and down the fence outside the window, and that's all I could see was these two squirrels just chasing each other. And it's like, oh my God, I'm going to get distracted in a minute. I have to concentrate and not watch these bloody squirrels. And done.
It was the most fun ever. I hate my life. As expected, it was epic, historic, galactic levels of suckitude. Ignorant monkeys.
This show is brought to you by Holosuite Media. Computer, list other available Holosuite Media programs.
Loading Holosuite preview program for The Expanse, a Star Trek Enterprise podcast.
When you look at it now, you're like, oh, there is some stuff in there that it's not been handled delicately,
Right.
I think.
But I think at the time, they handled it as delicately as they knew how to.
Exactly. You are spot on with that.
It's not that, through all time, it was not delicately handled. It's just at that time, with their understanding, they did the best they could.
They had the best intentions with it.
Kind of like Trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't even think, if anyone watched it now and got offended by it, I don't think ever the intention was for that. I'd like to think anyone could look at it and think, well, actually, let's applaud the show for doing this story when no one else was doing these kind of stories.
Loading Holosuite preview program for There Are 4 Questions, a Star Trek Spotlight podcast.
That felt pretty cool. And that's when I really, really started connecting with Star Trek, when I was actually here and on the level of creator as opposed to fan. So that was where I started getting, it was like, hey, I could do this. I remember writing, I sent this letter to him. I wrote to Eric Stillwell before I moved to Los Angeles and asked about the rules for submitting the script and all that stuff. And then I had this idea, never heard back from him.
Loading Holosuite preview program for Ladies Trek Library, Women with a Passion for Star Trek Books.
One of the reasons I was excited to read this book was because it's called Uhura's Song. And we don't get a lot of books where Uhura is a main character. And she was my favorite character from the original series. So I was excited to see a book about her.
And I like how, and I was thinking about the Broadway play Cats, because they kind of used cat names that reminded me of the names in this book. So, and this book was written in '85, so it could have been inspired by Cats in that way.
Computer, deactivate Holosuite.